Welcome. This is the Bright Professor, and I'm Dr. Leonard Bright. I am a full professor at Texas A&M University. My first attempt at promotion to the full professor rank was denied by the university, and I explore this situation in my Promotion Denied YouTube series. Today, I will explore the retaliation I experienced in my annual reviews and merit salary increases after I filed an EEOC complaint. I developed this series for research and educational purposes to give faculty and employees an inside view of what retaliation looks like in the workplace. During my first 7 years at Texas A&M, I received very positive annual reviews that celebrated my teaching, service, and especially my research accomplishments. I also underwent a comprehensive post-tenure review where a committee of full professors from my department concluded that my research over a 6-year period, quote, clearly exceeded the level associated with a satisfactory rating, unquote. Again, at no time did my department highlight any negative concerns regarding any aspect of my performance. After the dean and the department had learned of my EEOC complaint against their decision to deny my promotion to the full professor rank, boy, did things change. My annual reviews took a drastic turn. I received my very first poor annual review that was laced with threats. The department head even attempted to initiate a needs improvement plan, but her efforts failed. However, the annual review remained largely negative and had an aversive impact on my salary increase. I was also the only person left out of an across-the-board salary increase that was given to every associate professor in my department except me. This video presents the grievance hearing that was conducted with the department head, where she answers questions about the annual review she wrote and the threats that it contained. The next video will explore the salary investigation that followed. Let's get started.
Let me welcome you, Dr. Professor and Head, Department of Public Service and Administration, the Bush School of Government and Public Service, to this meeting.
Thank you. I want to go to the letter that you've sent, Ms. T. It says, since the start of 2019 calendar year, you have refused all my invitations to serve at the department, school, or university levels. Going forward, I remind you that satisfactory performance in the PSAA department includes the reasonable fulfillment of requested service. I ask, what was in the 60-30-10 allocation, what was the requirement of service allocation?
The requirement in our bylaws was a requirement that faculty members perform reasonable requested service, and that is...
That's not what I'm asking. In the 60-30-10, because we have very less...
Doctor, please.
I would absolutely prefer that you answer the question that we asked. Thank you. In the 60-30-10 allocation, what is the service allocation for Dr. Bright?
10.
10, okay. He was already serving as the assistant provost, am I right?
He served as the assistant provost from until August of 2018.
Okay, and your letter is dated October 2019.
Correct.
As I see it, it's dated October 2019. So what would be, I mean, first of all, I want to ask, in your department, how many times can a tenured professor who wants to get promoted say, look, I want to focus on my writing or teaching. I do not want to serve in this, in what you've requested me to serve in?
It is quite possible for a professor to indicate that they are not a good fit, or it is not a good time for any specific request of service. The only point I was making in that letter was that there had been a pattern since the start of that calendar year that Dr. Bright had refused all requests for service, and that should that pattern continue, that would be unsatisfactory. Because we would not satisfy our bylaw requirement that faculty members conduct a reasonable amount of requested service.
Sure. So in a year, when a faculty member denies a service request, I would assume that that faculty member is given a reasonable time before a second service request is made of that faculty member. So Dr. Bright, so this begins from January of 2019 until October of 2019 of a faculty who stepped down as the associate provost, which I think is a high service position. So we're talking about 10 or 11 months. Well, I can say about 10 months because you wrote the letter in October. What's the date? October 11th. So we're really talking from January to October here, not even 11 months, right? So I'm just curious, is that how service requests are made? When a faculty member says, I don't want to serve, then you, in a period of 10 months, you ask them 3 times. So that basically means every 3 months you ask them. Now we had 3 months of summer too. So you had 1 semester where he said he has obviously refused a service request. He had a 2nd semester, and there has already been a 3rd denial of service request. Is that how all faculty members are requested to serve in service? Because we don't do that in the, we would consider that highly inappropriate when a faculty member says, I don't want to serve, and in a matter of 10 months, if the dean comes back and asks the faculty 3 times, I asked you to serve, I asked you to serve, especially if the faculty stepped down from a service from College Station, trust me, in the we would consider that inappropriate. So I'm just trying to see what you would do in the Bush School. Thank you.
So we would not consider that inappropriate, particularly when we are a very small college and have a limited number of tenured and tenure track faculty in our committee. We had, for example, 2 individuals who were up for tenure and promotion that year. We required staffing for evaluation subcommittees for each of them, one of whom was specifically in Dr. Bright's area of expertise. It was quite natural to ask him to serve on the evaluation subcommittee for that faculty member. It would have, in my mind, been considered inappropriate not to ask him to serve.
Oh, I see. I'm also then surprised, in your mind, you would have also been very careful of the 10% only requirement that he has to serve, right? I mean, I understand it's a small school, but I also understand that his requirement is only to do 10% of his job for service. So you realize that there's a, you know, a discrepancy there.
Oh, we are all fully aware that there is a lot of, that the service burdens on faculty are higher in a small school. And they are spread as evenly as I possibly can. I believe that the dean also provided you with a spreadsheet of the service obligations of all of the faculty members in my department. And you can see that over the year in question, there was no context in which you could conclude that Dr. Bright had served more than his colleagues amongst the tenured faculty.
So he did serve more than his...
No, he did not serve more. He served substantially less.
And that's only considering the service to the school, not considering the entire university, right?
That includes all service to the university reported to us by the faculty members who were encouraged to report to us their service.
So, Dr.
His reporting, you're saying that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so based on his reporting, you feel, and that's your personal feeling, that he has not served adequately to fulfill his 10% service requirement. So I'll take that.
No, I won't say that. What
What
I
would you say
said
then?
was that, and for his evaluation for that year, he received the highest evaluations for service of our faculty. What I said was a cautionary note that should the pattern of refusal of service continue, okay, then the subsequent year, the evaluation of which has not yet been conducted, that I would be forced to conclude that his service contributions were not those expected of an associate professor.
Dr. If I can follow up on this, the specific aspect of service. In many colleges, yours including, persons of color are in the minority in numbers, and often get, because of the need for diversity in committees and such, get disproportionately asked to serve.
Yes, they do.
And if and feel pressured to serve. He's the only tenured professor or person of color in the college, as I understand it.
Yes.
Is there a reasonable? Do you think there could be a reasonable belief that if an individual had just come off serving as a vice provost, then there was need to build their resume back again, that they would have a reasonable expectation to be freed of service? The second issue is you acknowledge that that Dr. Bright's service in this current year was satisfactory. You gave it the highest score. Would it be possible to see then the follow-up statement that, however, you have refused all my invitations to serve, and I will going forward, I remind you that satisfactory performance for a tenured faculty member includes the reasonable fulfillment of requested service. Do you see that as possibly implying a threat that that if you don't serve, that you will that Dr. Bright would be penalized? So firstly, the issue of service commitments of persons of color in particular, just having come off a major service commitment, and secondly, a sense of being threatened.
All right, let me answer first to the issue of just having come off a period of substantial service, which Dr. Bright had done. And but for that service, he had received a teaching reduction. And during the period of evaluation and during this academic year, he continued to have a 10% service obligation to my department. It's not unreasonable to expect that he would have, having returned to the department, he would have continued to have a normal service expectation, commensurate with those of other faculty members at his rank. I have been very careful by tracking the service commitments and obligations of faculty to try and avoid disproportionately burdening one faculty member over another, in particular to avoid disproportionately burdening those faculty members who say yes to requests for service. It's important that everyone contributes to the service obligations of the department. As to whether or not my statement should have been taken as cautionary, that it was appropriate for me in the context of an annual review to advise a faculty member if a pattern of behavior was risky.
Could it be seen as a threat?
Included a pattern within, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Times, and what is the statistics for concluding as a pattern?
Dr. Bright had refused my requests for service, and if he
3 times, Dr.
Yes,
That's a pattern?
All requests for service since.
Okay,
the
define a
start
pattern
of
for
the
me in the Bush school, because I mean, you could ask one of the deans the number of times we deny requests. So could you please?
Public service is a noble calling and part of our obligations.
Yes, it's a 10% calling, am I right? And here,
Yes.
okay, a 10% calling to the university, and it's not a 10% calling to a department, because if that is the case, then what he did to the university has to be assessed separately. Am I right in saying that?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Well, can I explain that? The 10% should include his university service and his department service.
Yes.
Yes, but when you just talked, you actually said 10% service to the department.
No. The department has a number of service obligations. His complete service portfolio, as it were, is expected to represent approximately 10%.
Right, and usually, so that's one thing. It's not just his. So I understand your job is to be mindful of the, the service allocation within your department, but serve the university at large. I am doing this UGC thing. It's actually letting me off of several of our service obligations.
As it should.
Yes, and that's out of respect, and I don't think my dean would ever say, because your spending time is not fulfilling your 10% or 30% commitment as required, right? So it's up to me in some ways to decide what is 10%. But I want to talk about the term pattern. Define pattern at the Bush School. How many times could we defy a department head and then be labeled as having a pattern of defiance within the Bush School? And how many other professors have had that pattern of defiance at the Bush School?
There are many other professors who have refused requests for service, I am sure. There is only one professor who refused all of my requests for service, and I cautioned him that that was, in my mind, a problem.
Excuse me, could I interject a question?
Mm-hmm.
This is from I have a question about salary increases. Presumably the salary increases are what the annual reviews are all about. Is that correct? Okay. So
I don't think that's what they're all about, but they are clear. That's clearly something that's very salient. Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, fair enough. But I was wondering, when you attach a cautionary remark to an evaluation, to an otherwise positive evaluation, does that affect the salary increase?
No.
It doesn't?
No.
Okay. Well, that was my question for right now. You can pick it up again if you want.
Sure. I just don't want to use the word, I mean, cautionary is the word Dr. prefers. I wouldn't call it a cautionary note. I would rather prefer the word used. So cautionary / threatening is what I would call it. I don't think we've concluded that it's merely cautioning, given the language in that report. So I'd let other people ask questions.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, just to follow up, can you kind of step in somebody else's shoes and perceive how a note like that in an annual evaluation might be more than a caution, might be more like a threat, might be perceived more like a threat?
It is my understanding of the annual evaluation process that I am supposed to help my faculty thrive and provide them with information that will help them succeed, and to point out areas of strength and areas of weakness. I don't consider it threatening to inform someone of a potential area of weakness.
But this was not an area of weakness in this particular year's.
No, it was not.
This was a possibility of a future weakness.
This was looking forward, yes. Advisory looking forward. It would be inappropriate in my mind to fail to inform a faculty member of a risk that they are running.
I have a question when you guys are done.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So at the same time that this occurred, because how long have you been the department head, Dr.?
Since the summer of 2018.
Okay. So at the time, I'm assuming, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you were aware of the process of his promotion, his full promotion package, and that there were some issues with that. And so as department head and, thinking about personnel management, is that something that you could take into account? Because so giving perspective taking. So if you're in the midst of a battle for a promotion and there's all these things that you think are being done potentially not the way the bylaws are written, and then all of a sudden you have a unsatisfactory annual review, and so then that's now something else that's been adding on to the other set of circumstances that have been going on. Could you at least see how the language could be alarming? Like, oh my gosh, what's happening? I thought I'm doing my job. I'm trying to do my job. I have all these things that are going on, and now I'm getting this, and I've never gotten it before. Does that make sense? And I can speak from experience as someone who does, sort of skip out on service here and there, that my department head said, here are some things I think you'd like to do. And so here's a list. And I got a menu of things, and it was a very positive conversation, but I also didn't have other things going on. Does that make sense? Like just a little perspective taking on how it could be perceived as sort of a triggering, alarmist sort of language, given the context, the total context of everything that's going on with Dr. Bright.
I can't put myself into his head to say that. I can see that it would be distressing to receive less than laudatory feedback. I also see it as constructive to provide that kind of feedback because it was so very easy to cure.
But I'm just talking about the language that was used, the framing of it, because it wasn't that he was out of compliance at that moment. He was heading towards being out of compliance.
Right.
You know what I mean? So using different language so someone can say, hey, I'm trying to look out for you. This is constructive feedback.
Absolutely.
My intent was to look out for him and to provide constructive feedback and to say.
So we're not talking about intention though.
service.
We're talking about the language and how that language will be perceived.
The language is a tricky thing, and if I have been inartful in my language, then I apologize, but my sole intent was cautionary to help my faculty member thrive.
That's very helpful, but and thank you for apologizing. But the casualties, Dr. Bright, right? Do you? I always, I'm so thankful when people apologize. But it's.
I apologize for inartful language if that is what you want me to apologize for. But I think it was appropriate to provide him with a caution. I think it was the right thing to do as a department head.
Dr. Again, to follow up on the annual review, so you had an initial review and then a revised review based on a recommendation from Dean Welch.
I had a revised review based on a recommendation from the Dean of Faculties that the evaluation center needed to be limited to the either satisfactory or unsatisfactory as laid out in our 2015 bylaws, that even though the university rules had changed, the option of a needs improvement, which I took to be a less harsh conclusion than unsatisfactory, was not open to me. And so I needed to redo the review. And at that time, Dean Welsh provided me with substantial additional documentation regarding Dr. Bright's research activities during the annual evaluation period that we're discussing. And I was, surprised that he had not provided the information as part of his submission. Faculty members don't typically hide their light under a bushel in that context. And in light of the additional materials that I was received, I thought long and hard about how I would have interpreted that submission had I received it in spring, and concluded independently that I would have interpreted that submission as a satisfactory level of research activity for the year. And that's what my October evaluation so indicated.
And do you have, before you actually write out this letter, do you have an interview or meeting with the particular faculty member? I'm surprised too that you didn't have all of the information needed. Did that come out in a conversation ahead of time of this letter was written?
The faculty member, I email faculty members requesting submission of their annual review materials. You have the documentation of what that solicitation looks like. It asks for information about publications and about ongoing research activities, about teaching, and about service. And I worked from the material that Dr. Bright submitted to me, the same as I worked from the material submitted to me by every other faculty member in my department.
Okay, so there was no opportunity for I'm just asking about process. You don't have a meeting with the faculty member before you draft these letters. This letter is based on the documentation that is just provided to you.
I base the letter on the documentation that's been provided to me.
Okay. One of the striking things looking at the two reviews is that you retain a lot of the language from the first review and the second review, even when you reach a different conclusion. Can you take us through your thinking about that, with the need for retaining this language and then creating an amended addendum, if you will, in each section?
I essentially communicated to Dr. Bright that the materials he provided in his initial submission were consistent with the conclusion of that his work needed improvement, and I can articulate that more fully for this group if you'd like me to. And then I turned to the new materials, which Dr. Bright had never provided to me, but which the dean did make available to me regarding his research activities over that academic period. He had two papers that were accepted with revisions, and two mid-range journals or weekend journals. And So I
I'm sorry,
did
you said mid-range, and then what was the other term you used?
end week end
Okay.
distribution journals. They're I agree completely with Dr. Bright's conclusion that he should withdraw those submissions from those journals because he is much better served focusing his attention on the other revise and resubmits that he has in his portfolio.
Again, I have to say, that's very, the letter does not read the way. So I went back and read the letter just now. A letter like this from a department head, at least to me, maybe I'm more sensitive, would be disturbing is the word. It doesn't sound caution. To me, it's asking for submission. And it also, I mean, there isn't a word that says he's done well. His research activity, you're basically saying you did not provide evidence, you've given me no choice. I'd like to raise concerns with you regarding the choice of your research outlets. I believe your recent articles were underplaced and their contribution deserved, of course, a wider readership. I encourage you to submit more of your work to journals where it will have more visibility. So that's about his, research. And then, of course, about his service, even though he's done exceptionally well, it ends with, I'm going to caution you or whatever, threaten you or request you or whatever you want to call it, basically saying, I'm going to get you next year. However well we put it, you're basically saying, I'm going to get you next year, watch out.
No, not at all.
Well, to me, that's how the language reads, Dr. Right? And you apologized for it. And I'm sorry. If I had gotten that kind of a letter from my dean, that's exactly how I would read it. And I would expect my dean to use better language before he sends that. Just as you are expecting him to have submitted everything before, just as you are expecting him to use his, Dr. Bright to use his thinking as the department head, I think I would, especially when you're writing to someone who wants to get promoted. So yes, you're absolutely, you have your right to disagree, but this is how I read it, unfortunately. And then after he resubmits, that same language gets repeated, not only by you, but also by Dr. Welsh. So given all of this, I want to go back to another claim that he makes. You have very few minorities in your department. So I am just wondering, as the department head, what kind of things have you done to ensure that minorities feel welcome and they feel settled and they're integrated into part of your little group in the Bush School?
The school is small, and so there are, and we are not searching this year. We have a number of faculty members who are female. In fact, we're disproportionately female, given the disciplines involved. We do not have any other faculty members who are Black. We do have faculty members who are Hispanic and who are Asian. I have reached out to all of the faculty members to try and provide them with a welcoming, supportive environment. What specifically are you asking?
To go further into this issue, there can be attempts at fairness and attempts at an even playing field, but things can have disproportionate impacts. For example, is that something that you as part of the administration discuss when what is the possibility of disproportionate impacts or differential impacts of rules and such that might look objective on the surface, but actually have very different effects when applied to different people? I'm just wondering how that the letter that you wrote, the revised version of the letter that you wrote, was very strong, shall we say? And I'm just wondering whether you'd considered all of the circumstances around Dr. Bright's publication record.
I believe that I had considered all the circumstances, and I was trying to provide him with the kind of feedback that will allow him to thrive. It's important that faculty members get constructive feedback in the annual review process, and that is what I intended to provide, and that is what I think I did provide.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that is difficult to wrap one's head around is if you look at the trajectory of annual reports and annual reviews, they have been pretty positive and starting out with fairly laudatory statements, excepting for this last one, which was you were the new department head at this point in time, but you've been a member of this department for a while. What changed, in your opinion, from the reviews by previous department heads that were pretty positive to this review, which looks very very strongly negative from the outside perspective?
There were a couple of things that had changed. One of which is that he did not report to me initially on any particular research activity after April of the year under evaluation. And that was surprising. He reported a journal article that had been counted as published the year before. So that was surprising. There was not the engagement with the broader journals in the field that had been lauded by previous department heads. And there had been, as a result of this, I went back and looked at earlier reports, and there had been suggestions, particularly from Dr. annual letters, that that his publication outlets were more narrow than would be ideal for strengthening his kind of research reputation and standing in the field.
But you do not disagree with the overall thrust of the previous reports. So do you think the other previous department heads had it wrong?
I think that the previous department heads were in the middle of a sequence of articles, and it was more difficult for them to see that his research had become narrowly focused on a small number of outlets with limited scholarly impact. And that as a fresh set of eyes, I was able to see that, and I felt like it was incumbent upon me to share that perspective with him.
Would it not have been appropriate to talk with him first and give him an opportunity to correct it before writing, before expressing the concern in an annual review? Especially
During the
sorry.
Go ahead, Dr.
the annual review letters he was informed that a draft of my annual review letter was available for review. He didn't want to see a draft.
And that this was an email that you sent out to all the faculty that the draft was there for review?
Yes. Well, I mean, separately, it's not one mass email.
No, right, but each faculty had an opportunity to review the draft letter.
Yes.
In a formal email that was sent out.
Yes.
Okay.
And he served, I'm just going back to something, sorry, I just want to clarify something very quickly. He served as the assistant provost, right, for a certain period of time.
He served as the associate provost. Oh, excuse me. Assistant provost, yes.
Assistant provost.
Yes.
And I mean, this is something really for the entire committee. I mean, do we expect the provost to write at the same level at which we are writing and to produce things at the same level? I'm not sure what the administrative, how that requirement is. Typically, I would assume, and I really don't know, I'm just asking, when they serve in that, in a service obligation that demands a lot of time, I would assume that it would be expected that there would be a reduction in teaching and proportionate, at least, in the quality and caliber of your article placement and so on and so forth.
If I may respond, there was a reduction in his teaching responsibilities during his time as assistant provost. There was no reduction in his research responsibilities during that time.
Do you ever review him when he was in that position, or?
Well, he was in that position overlapping with this one for a short period of time. I've only conducted one review of Dr. Bright. That's the one you're looking at.
Okay. But did he have that position?
And so, as my letter states, this did not cover him. We was in the assistant provost role for 5 months of the evaluation period.
So I have a sort of general question. There seems to be a kind of tension between, was he getting enough information, and is he now getting too much information in a too direct fashion? So in the past, was he not given enough information about whether he was really ready to go for full professor, and now he's getting information that if you don't do this, it's going to come back and bite you? So regarding his service, so he's now getting very direct communication about what he should and shouldn't do. So
I have a very direct style, yeah.
Yeah, so no, but and could some of that be due to the fact that there's a grievance going on? So one is more likely to think, I better be really clear about what I'm saying here, because there's this grievance going on and I don't want there to be any ambiguity whatsoever. Could that affect how one communicates with anybody who might be bringing a grievance versus somebody who isn't?
At the time, Dr. Bright had a claim before the EEOC that was being reviewed by the university with respect to racial discrimination in the promotion. I do not believe it was formally entitled a grievance, but that definitely was context for what was going on.
So could that affect how you conducted his review relative to somebody who wasn't in that situation?
I was very, very careful, but I believe I'm careful with all of the reviews. I thought it was necessary to be clear and to provide information on how to thrive, but this was partially because this is the first review that I had provided for any faculty members. So for all of the faculty members, I was trying to provide them with information about the journals in which they were placing their work and information about their service commitments. There was no one else to whom I needed to communicate anything about a lack of willingness to provide service.
Thank you.